When people hear the word discipline, they often think of restriction, of limitation, of saying no to things. They associate it with rigidity, a loss of spontaneity, or maybe even punishment. But there's a deeper truth, one that most people miss. Discipline is not about saying no to life. It's about saying yes to what matters most. And if we truly understand what discipline is, we begin to realize something profound. Discipline is freedom. That may sound contradictory at first. How can something that feels like structure, rules, and routine be the very thing that sets us free? But let's break this down in human terms. Imagine someone waking up every morning without a plan. They do what they feel like when they feel like it. They follow their moods, their impulses, their distractions. At first that sounds like freedom, doesn't it? No alarm clocks, no to-do lists, just waking up and doing whatever you want. But give it time. Over the weeks, the days blur together. The things they hoped to achieve start drifting further and further out of reach. Their health suffers, their relationships fray, their purpose feels vague. They begin to feel trapped by their own choices, or more precisely, by the absence of choice. Now contrast that with someone who wakes up with intention. They've built habits around the things that matter to them. Maybe they don't love getting up at 6 a.m. to run, but they do it anyway. Because they've chosen a future where health is non-negotiable. Maybe they don't enjoy turning down every invitation that comes their way, but they do it. Because they're writing a book, launching a business, learning a craft. They're not always comfortable, but they're aligned. And here's the powerful part. Because they've mastered discipline, they get to choose their life. Discipline is freedom in its highest form. It frees us from regret, from mediocrity, from the pain of what could have been. And it gives us the opportunity to live a life that's intentional, not accidental. There's a story I once heard about a violinist who practiced 8 hours a day. A young musician approached him after a performance and said, "I'd give anything to play like you." The violinist paused and replied, "Would you give 8 hours a day for 10 years? Because that's what it takes." See, we admire the product of discipline, but we resist the process. And yet it's the process that leads to mastery, not just of a skill, but of ourselves. Too many people look at discipline as something external, as if it's a rule being imposed upon them. But real discipline doesn't come from the outside, it comes from within. It's not about being told what to do, it's about knowing who you want to be and then living in alignment with that vision, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Because the truth is, discipline will demand more from you than motivation ever will. Motivation is emotional, it comes and goes, it's tied to how we feel. Discipline, on the other hand, is grounded in why we do what we do. It's the difference between saying, I feel like working out, and I work out because my future self depends on me. It's the difference between I want to write a book and I write every day because I believe this story can change lives. One is based on feelings, the other is rooted in purpose. We don't rise to the level of our inspiration, we rise to the level of our clarity, of our why. The people who master discipline don't have more willpower than the rest of us. They've just made their why stronger than their excuses. And here's the beautiful thing. Once we stop treating discipline as a burden and start treating it as a gift, it transforms the way we live. We stop feeling like victims of circumstance and start becoming creators of our future. We stop asking, what am I allowed to do today, and start asking, what kind of person am I becoming through my choices? That's where real freedom lies. The freedom to become who you were meant to be, not someday, but today. One disciplined act at a time. Let me be honest with you. Discipline isn't sexy. It doesn't get loud applause. No one claps when you choose a quiet night to study over a party. No one celebrates when you skip dessert, turn off Netflix, or show up at the gym after a long day. But these are the moments where your character is forged. These are the invisible victories that shape the visible outcomes. We love to celebrate greatness in others. But we forget that greatness is not an act, it's a habit. Built in silence, refined through repetition, fueled by discipline. I want to challenge you with a question. I don't ask this lightly. Are you willing to do what's hard today so you can live a life of freedom tomorrow? Because that's what discipline is. It's not about being perfect. It's not about controlling every aspect of your day. It's about choosing again and again what matters most, even when it costs you something now, especially then. The person you want to be is already inside you. But that version of you won't emerge by accident. It will take effort, repetition, discipline. But most importantly, it will take a clear why. When your reason is strong enough, your excuses start to sound weak. So the next time you think of discipline, don't think of it as a cage. Think of it as a key. Not something that locks you in, but something that sets you free. Because in the end, it's not discipline or freedom. It's discipline for freedom. And once you grasp that, everything changes. And there's something important we all need to accept if we're ever going to master discipline. It does not come naturally. We are not born disciplined. It's not a personality trait. It's not genetic. No one wakes up one day magically able to delay gratification, ignore distractions, and keep showing up no matter how they feel. It's not how we're wired. We are built for survival, not for sustained personal growth. And yet, if we want to live a life of meaning, impact, and intention, we must be willing to build what doesn't come naturally. Let's be honest, the path of least resistance is always the easiest to take. Our brains are wired to protect us from discomfort, from risk, from uncertainty. When we're tired, our instincts say rest. When we're afraid, our instincts say run. When we're bored or overwhelmed, our instincts say scroll, snack, or snooze. That's not laziness, that's biology. The challenge is that what kept us safe thousands of years ago often keeps us stuck today. And that's the core of the human struggle. Discipline asks us to act against our instincts for the sake of something greater. It demands that we prioritize our values over our impulses. And that isn't easy. In fact, it's one of the hardest things we'll ever do. But here's the good news. Just because discipline isn't natural doesn't mean it's impossible. It means it's a skill that can be built, strengthened, and refined over time. Like any skill, it requires practice. It requires failure. It requires patience. But it is buildable. I remember talking to a leader who built a multi-million-dollar company from the ground up. He wasn't charismatic. He wasn't particularly organized. He didn't have a degree from a top university. But he was disciplined. Every single day he showed up. Not when it was convenient, not when it felt good. Every single day. And when I asked him how he developed that discipline, he said something I'll never forget. I got tired of starting over. But he explained how many times he had tried and quit before, how many days he had lost momentum because he let feelings lead instead of purpose. Until one day he made a promise to himself. No more starting over. That was his turning point. And that's where the muscle of discipline started to form. Not from motivation, but from a decision. We tend to think that people who are disciplined have it easier, that they don't struggle like the rest of us, that they like the grind, that they're born with more energy or mental toughness or time. But what if that's not true? What if the people we admire most aren't naturally different from us? They've just accepted the struggle as part of the process. What if their strength doesn't come from what they feel, but from what they decide? That reframes everything. Discipline, at its core, is the ability to keep a promise to yourself. It's the ability to say, I will do this, and then follow through. Not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not. And for most of us, that doesn't start with confidence, it starts with doubt, with fear, with resistance. Which is why building discipline is not about removing those feelings. It's about learning to act in spite of them. You don't overcome struggle by avoiding it. You overcome it by engaging with it, one small choice at a time. Think about learning to play an instrument. The first time you sit at a piano or pick up a guitar, your body resists. Your fingers ache, your brain fumbles, the sounds you produce are rough, clunky, even embarrassing. But if you show up again the next day and the next, you get a little better. You don't wake up disciplined. You become disciplined through the discomfort, through the effort, through the struggle. Repetition builds familiarity. Familiarity builds confidence. Confidence builds momentum, and momentum builds discipline. But here's something critical. The early stages are never glamorous. No one applauds you for waking up early to go for a run when it's still dark out. No one sees the quiet decision to skip the distraction and do the work. There are no trophies for showing up when no one else is watching. But these moments matter. These are the moments that shape the future. Discipline is not built in the spotlight. It's built in silence. And the silence is where most people give up. Not because they're weak, not because they don't care, but because they thought it was supposed to be easier. We live in a world that celebrates ease, speed, and comfort. We're told that if it's hard, it must not be right. But the truth is, everything meaningful in life demands discomfort. Growth demands effort. Discipline demands struggle. And that struggle isn't a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that you're doing it right. We have to stop seeing struggle as the enemy and start seeing it as the evidence of progress. If you're struggling to build discipline, that means you're in the game. That means you're fighting for something better. That means you haven't given in to the pull of comfort and complacency. And that's something to be proud of. So the next time you feel the urge to quit, to skip the work, to choose easy over important, pause, breathe, remind yourself, this isn't supposed to be natural. This is supposed to be hard because you are choosing growth. You are choosing to build, not just react. And that choice, hard as it may be, is what separates those who dream from those who do. You don't need to be born with discipline. You need to build it. And that happens not in a moment, but in a series of moments. 1,000 small choices, 1,000 internal battles, 1,000 steps, even when you'd rather stand still. And over time, something amazing happens. The same actions that once felt impossible start to feel inevitable. The struggle doesn't vanish, but your capacity grows. Your sense of self changes. You begin to trust yourself. And when that happens, discipline is no longer something you have to chase. It's something you become. The struggle is real, but it's also necessary. And if you're willing to engage with it, to embrace it, to keep choosing what matters over what's easy, then one day you'll look back and realize you didn't just build discipline, you built yourself. When people talk about discipline, the conversation almost always starts with willpower. We celebrate the idea of mental toughness, the ability to grind it out, to push through resistance, to outwork our excuses. And while there's something noble about that image, it's also misleading. Because willpower is limited. It's like a battery that drains with every decision you make. And if your environment constantly works against you, no amount of personal strength will be enough to sustain your goals. Here's a truth most people miss. We don't succeed because we're stronger than others. We succeed because we design environments that make discipline easier and failure harder. Think about this. If you're trying to eat healthier, but your fridge is full of junk food, what happens when you get home after a long day and your willpower is already worn down? If you're trying to write a book, but your phone is lighting up with notifications every few minutes, how deep will your focus really go? And if you surround yourself with people who don't share your values or your drive, how long before your vision starts to blur? The environments we live in, the systems we set up, and the people we surround ourselves with, they're either reinforcing our discipline or eroding it. There's a story I once heard about a guy who lost over 100 pounds, not through some extreme diet or overnight transformation, but by making one small change to his environment. He rearranged his kitchen. He put all the healthy food at eye level and moved all the snacks to a high cabinet, out of reach. That one change reduced his temptation just enough to make better choices consistently. He didn't rely on willpower to resist chips every single day. He just made them harder to access. We overestimate the power of self-control and underestimate the power of structure. But here's the reality. The most disciplined people don't fight harder, they fight smarter. They don't set themselves up to fail and then blame their lack of motivation. They remove friction, they reduce noise, and they make the right thing easier to do. I once worked with a startup founder who had trouble focusing. Every morning, he would try to get into deep work, and every morning he'd fail. Slack messages, emails, texts, they pulled his attention in 100 directions. His calendar was packed, his phone never stopped buzzing, and he told me he just needed to be more disciplined. But he didn't need more willpower, he needed a better environment. So we made two simple changes. We blocked off 2 hours every morning for focused work, no meetings, no interruptions. And we got him a second phone, one with no apps or notifications, just for emergencies. Within a week, he told me he was getting more done before 10 a.m. than he used to get done in a full day, not because he changed who he was, but because he changed where he was working from. Environment shapes behavior more than intention does. If you walk into a library, you're likely to feel more focused. If you walk into a gym, you'll feel more inclined to move. We often think our behavior is about choice, but much of it is about context. Want to wake up earlier? Put your alarm across the room. Want to read more? Put a book on your pillow so you'll see it every night. Want to waste less time online? Remove the apps, block the sites, and turn off the noise. These aren't hacks. They're commitments to design an environment that supports who you want to become. And this doesn't just apply to things, it applies to people. If you're constantly around people who mock your discipline, minimize your dreams, or distract you from your path, your willpower is going to burn out fast. But if you're surrounded by people who encourage your growth, hold you accountable, and reflect back to you the best version of yourself, then discipline doesn't feel like a burden, it becomes your culture. One of the most powerful things you can do for your future is to be ruthless about the environments you allow yourself to stay in. That includes your physical spaces, your digital habits, and your social circles. It's not about being extreme, it's about being intentional. Discipline is not just what you do, it's what you allow around you. I've seen people radically change their lives by making small, deliberate shifts in their environment. Not by becoming superhuman, but by becoming strategic. They stopped relying on fleeting bursts of motivation and started building systems that worked even on their worst days. Because the truth is, your environment wins. Every time. You can have the best goals, the deepest purpose, and the strongest will, but if you're surrounded by chaos, distractions, and temptations, your discipline will eventually wear down. But if you build an environment that reinforces your values, where your habits are supported, where your vision is visible, where your future is easy to choose, then discipline stops being a daily battle and starts becoming a natural rhythm. This isn't about making life easy. It's about making the right things easier and the wrong things harder. Don't wait until your willpower is tested to try to act on your goals. Set your life up so your goals are the default, not the exception. Because at the end of the day, we don't rise to the level of our motivation, we fall to the level of our systems. And your systems are shaped by your environment. So if you're struggling with discipline right now, don't ask what's wrong with me. Ask what around me needs to change. What is triggering the behavior you're trying to avoid? What cues could you move, remove, or replace to make progress the path of least resistance? You are not weak. You are human. And humans are influenced more by their surroundings than their intentions. You want to master discipline? Start by mastering your environment. Change your space. Curate your influences. Protect your energy. Discipline will follow. Because when the environment supports the mission becomes sustainable. And that's how you build a life where discipline is no longer a daily fight, but a daily flow. We live in a culture that celebrates extremes. We cheer for the big transformations, the intense 90-day sprints, the dramatic before and after moments. We admire people who go all in, who burn bright, who show up one day and change everything overnight. And while those stories are exciting, they're also misleading, because real lasting progress doesn't come from intensity, it comes from consistency. Discipline is not about how hard you can go on your best day, it's about how often you can keep showing up on your worst. It's about what you do when you don't feel like it, when no one's watching, when the results are invisible, when everything in you says skip it, and you still choose to follow through. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I met a man who had been journaling every single morning for over 25 years. Same time, same chair, same notebook every day. I asked him if he ever missed a day. He said, once. My pen ran out of ink and I didn't have a spare. I never made that mistake again. I asked him what drove him to keep that habit for so long. His answer was simple: because it reminds me who I am. That's the heart of consistency. It's not just about repetition. It's about identity. It's about doing something so regularly that it becomes part of who you are, not just what you do. See, intensity changes your environment, but consistency changes you. Anyone can be intense for a moment. Anyone can go to the gym for 6 hours once. Anyone can write 10 pages in a flash of inspiration. Anyone can go all in on a new habit for a week. But it's the person who shows up again and again and again when it's boring, when it's frustrating, when it's slow, who builds something real. Consistency is quiet. It doesn't draw attention. There's nothing glamorous about brushing your teeth every day, or putting $10.00 a week into a savings account, or reading 10 pages of a book every night. But that's where growth happens. In the ordinary, in the seemingly insignificant, in the choices that don't impress anyone, but change everything over time. We underestimate the power of small. We think it has to be big to matter, but a drop of water repeated long enough can wear down stone. And a small habit repeated long enough can transform a life. I once worked with a woman who wanted to rebuild her confidence after a long season of burnout. She kept looking for the big breakthrough moment, the mindset shift, the big leap, but none of those seemed to stick until one day she decided to do something small, just a 5-minute walk every morning. Rain or shine, no excuses. That 5-minute walk turned into a journaling habit. That journaling habit turned into clearer goals. And eventually her entire posture changed, not because she did something dramatic, but because she became someone consistent. That's the secret most people miss. Discipline isn't about force, it's about rhythm. And consistency is the rhythm that reshapes our identity. Now let's be real. Consistency is hard, it's boring, it's slow. You'll do the right thing over and over again and see no results for weeks, maybe months. You'll want to quit. You'll wonder if it's worth it. You'll look at others who seem to be moving faster, doing more, living louder. But remember this, consistency compounds. Every rep you do, every word you write, every healthy choice you make, it's adding up, even when you can't see it yet. The most disciplined people I've met aren't the ones who go the hardest. They're the ones who keep going, day after day, step after step. They've learned to fall in love with the process, and that's what sets them apart. Because motivation fades, passion cools, but habits remain. Think of a tree. It doesn't grow tall because it stretches in one dramatic burst. It grows because it leans toward the light every single day, even if that light is dim, even if the growth is slow, even if no one notices. Over time, its roots deepen, its trunk strengthens, its branches expand, and one day it stands tall, not because of one big moment, but because of 1,000 small ones. We need to stop waiting for the big moment, the big change, the big push, and instead start mastering the small moment, the daily decision, the simple follow-through. Discipline is about building a life you can sustain, not one that burns you out. It's about asking yourself, what can I do today that I can still do tomorrow? It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. It's about showing up, even when you're tired, even when you're discouraged, even when progress feels invisible. And here's the most empowering part. Consistency doesn't require talent. It doesn't require luck. It doesn't even require a good mood. It only requires one thing, the decision to not stop. That decision is everything, because the world doesn't need more intense people who crash and burn. It needs more consistent people who build and last. So if you're building discipline in your life, start small, start simple, choose one thing, one habit, one promise, and keep it. Then do it again tomorrow and the next day and the next. Let it become part of you. Let it shape how you see yourself. Let it rewrite your story. Because the real transformation doesn't happen when you go all in. It happens when you don't opt out. When you stay, when you repeat, when you commit, not to the dramatic, but to the daily. That's where the power of discipline lives. Not in the firework, but in the flame that keeps burning. even when no one's watching, especially then. We grow up with a strange idea about discipline. From a young age, we learn to associate it with restriction, rules, punishment, limits. Be quiet, sit still, follow orders, do as you're told. So it's no wonder that as adults, we resist the idea. We think discipline means saying no to ourselves, to fun, to freedom. We think it's something rigid and confining, something that squeezes the life out of life. But what if we've misunderstood discipline entirely? What if discipline isn't the thing that holds us back, but the thing that sets us free? That idea might sound backward at first, but it's a paradox that holds a deeper truth. Because the people who live with the most freedom, freedom of time, freedom of choice, freedom of mind, are almost always the most disciplined. Let me explain. I once met a musician who was widely respected, not just for her talent, but for the way she played with absolute effortlessness. It looked like freedom. Her fingers moved with ease, her expression was relaxed, and her improvisation felt spontaneous and alive. But when I asked her how she got to that point, she smiled and said, thousands of hours of scales. Hours every day. For years, I practiced the structure so much that I earned the right to improvise. Her freedom on stage wasn't magic. It was the result of extreme discipline off stage. That's the paradox. Discipline creates freedom. We don't like this because we're wired to seek comfort in the short term. Freedom, to many of us, means doing what we want when we want. Sleeping in, skipping the workout, spending impulsively, saying yes to ease. But that kind of freedom is shallow. It feels good in the moment, but it costs us something later. Health, energy, clarity, opportunity. Eventually, that momentary freedom becomes a kind of trap. And that's where discipline comes in, not as a punishment, but as an investment in a better future. Discipline is choosing to do what's hard now so life can be easier later. It's creating order so chaos doesn't take over. It's putting in the effort up front to avoid regret down the road. When we discipline our time, we earn time back. When we discipline our spending, we earn financial peace. When we discipline our habits, we earn the freedom to live life on our terms instead of reacting to every pressure and impulse. I once worked with a leader who was constantly overwhelmed. His schedule was chaotic, his stress was high, and his health was deteriorating. He told me he needed more freedom, more breathing room, more balance, more space to think. But when we looked closer, the issue wasn't his calendar. It was his lack of boundaries. He said yes to everything. He skipped rest in the name of productivity. He had no system for his energy, no rhythm for renewal. So we started small. We set one hard stop on his workday. No emails after 7 p.m. We blocked time for exercise, not just to stay fit, but to reset mentally. We built a system where his week had structure. And within a month, he felt more free than he had in years. Not because he worked less, but because he worked with intent. Discipline gave him back control, and control is the soil where real freedom grows. This applies to every area of life. Think about a writer with a disciplined routine. They don't have to wait for inspiration, they create on demand. Think about a parent with consistent routines for their kids. The home becomes more peaceful, not more rigid. Or a business that runs with disciplined systems, it scales better, serves better, and survives longer. The irony is, the more structured we become in the right areas, the more space we create in others. But here's the thing. Discipline doesn't feel like freedom at first. It feels like effort, like resistance, like limitation. That's why most people stop. They don't stay with it long enough to reach the other side, the side where it becomes second nature, where the payoff shows up. Because the beginning of discipline is always uncomfortable. That's normal. It's your mind and body adjusting to new standards. But if you can push through that resistance, if you can stay consistent long enough, you reach a tipping point where discipline no longer feels like something you have to do, but something you choose to do. And that's the shift. Discipline isn't the enemy of freedom, it's the path to it. The freedom to think clearly. The freedom to act intentionally. The freedom to choose your